We know these technologies are advancing, but how they actually interplay into society is a really big question. Hi, I'm Nath, San Francisco Mayor's Chief Innovation Officer. And the discussion that we're about to have is really thinking about how do we work across industry and academia and with our community to advance new technologies in society, and specifically the DOT Smart City Challenge and the opportunity to advance mobility. When you think about autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles, it's happening today, and how do we think about the future and how do we work together?
Jay, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have you here at Wearable IoT World. My first question to you, with everything that's going on with the Department of Transportation Smart Cities Challenge, as one of the final 7 bidding for that $40 million grant, what is in your bid for the Department of Transportation Smart City Challenge?
Well, I think what differentiates San Francisco amongst the other 6 cities is that we've really taken an approach where we're listening to our community. Mm-hmm. So we're issuing a community challenge through our suggested approach, where we really want them to tell us what are their needs, what are those issues that they're having. Is it around bikers and drivers? Is it around delivery trucks blocking entries? What are those issues? So really going bottom up. And that's really a different approach than I think the other cities, which is sort of the mayor's office or their transportation department saying, hey, we're going to do this experiment in this area and we're going to put all this technology here. We don't want to take that approach. We really want the community to identify those needs, and for us to then work with the community, work with industry, work with our academic partners to really think about what are those solutions, and then pilot them to really maximize our learning, to see how it integrates into the neighborhood, into the region, and really work across the different sectors, because we know these technologies are advancing, but how they actually interplay into society is a really big question.
Smart Cities is really about citizen engagement, so it's really great to hear that you guys are using that bottom-up approach. And you guys will continue to gather feedback from citizens as they're using or piloting some of these initiatives in the city?
And I think what's interesting is when we do those pilots, we want to rethink how we actually streamline that approach. We have 3 years, and we want to get as much testing and learning as possible. And we know that governments aren't always moving in the quickest speed, and so how do we actually streamline that process from identifying those needs to actually deploying those experiments and learning from those experiments? And I think one of the things, obviously, is citizens, their feedback, both sort of qualitatively but also quantitatively, the data that they're collecting from their smartphones, from the sensors that we're going to be integrating into the environment, from the vehicles that will be collecting information. So we'll be seeing a tremendous amount of data through these experiments, and that's really why we're leaning on our academic partners, especially UC Berkeley and their experience that they have working with the private industry. Companies like Uber have been sharing data with them. Because they trust them. They understand that they know how to take care of that data and be good stewards, but also how to do that analysis and work with that to really see, are those interventions meaningful? Are we making sort of the progress and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? The other thing that we think is unique here is normally when cities go about doing pilots, there's a lot of risk involved in terms of the companies investing a lot of energy and time. What we're doing is actually going through a competitive process up front to say, hey, if you want to participate in this pilot, tell us how you're going to do that, and we'll choose the best companies or company. And if everything works out during that experimentation period, we then can move into a contract or a next step without having to go through another procurement step. Traditionally, people do pilots, and then what happens after that, really is an unknown. And that can be a big issue both for the companies as well as the cities and the community. We really want to create a pathway to go from learning and experimentation to sort of commercialization and scalability.
That's excellent. So essentially what you're saying is if they're accepted into working with you guys on this challenge, they can maybe get streamlined right into beyond pilot and then scale.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, that's huge. Because really that's the red tape that people usually run into when, and that slows down the whole process, right?
Yeah, government procurement is a big barrier, and that's why startups often don't even consider public sector. And one of the things that we've been working on and working in partnership with Wearable Worlds and a number of other organizations is a program called Startup in Residence, as you know, Lauren, and it's a program that embeds startups within government for 16 weeks, and it's a way to create new products and services. And that was a big shift we did this year, is to say, hey, let's do a competitive solicitation up front. It only takes 30, 60 minutes for the startups to apply. And if they're accepted, it's essentially a request for proposals, which is a very formal government vehicle. But once they're through that, and if everything works out, we can go into contract with them. And the startups know that. They know that something's at the end of this finish line, that they can actually get paid potentially and get into a contract and have a great win with San Francisco. And it's something we're really excited about.
Well, and that means a lot for startups that are eager to work with government, but it's hard to see the light on the end of the horizon.
That's right.
So to know that, if we do well, if this makes sense and works out, is it a guarantee, or is it like?
Well, it needs to be a good fit on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, did they meet the objectives? If they weren't able to produce a product and service that really met the outcomes, I don't think it makes sense for us as a city and stewards of taxpayer dollars to move forward. But it's a big shift in direction than what we normally do. If you think about how you buy things in your private life, you try out a car before you buy it, you walk through a home before you rent it or buy it. In government, we don't do that because it's highly sort of scripted, and you have to go through this RFP process, and it's all documents. You actually don't get to learn. And so we want to create that space to learn, to understand, but also respect the fact that they have business models and they have sales cycles that go for 18 months, 24 months. Companies can't exist that long, especially young companies. So we want to make sure that we lower those barriers and really expand the pool of people we're working with, not just the big companies, but also early stage companies, because we know that's where the innovation's happening, right?
We've really enjoyed working with you over the past couple of years, getting our startups in front of the city and having them know that there is an opportunity there. And if San Francisco does not win this specific DOT challenge, what will you guys do to go ahead and continue that momentum, or what other opportunities do you see on the horizon to keep working towards your goals?
Well, we feel very confident that we're well positioned. We obviously have done, we're at the center of all of this innovation. If you think about where the companies are, the new products, new services, the transformation that Uber, Lyft, and Scoot, and so many other companies are driving there, it's happening in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
It's not happening elsewhere in the country. So we have this innovation here in our backyard. We in the San Francisco government have done large grants before with DOT. We've got SF Park, which is a smart parking program. That's demand-based pricing, and that's now a global best practice. So we know how to do large-scale programs. We've got this tremendous innovation happening with our industry folks, and they really stepped up to the plate. They brought in just a tremendous amount of value. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but if we don't move, we're moving forward. We've learned that we need to be at the table. Society needs to be at the table with these technology companies and industry. They're inventing the future, but we need to make sure it's equitable, that there's opportunity for everybody, that it's safe, and that's the role of government, that's the role of society. We don't want products and services just for the 1%. We need to make sure it's accessible for everybody. And so that's a big part of it. And we need to be thoughtful so that these technologies don't create more issues. You can imagine autonomous vehicles that you go to your favorite restaurant and it's just circling the block, waiting for you to come back out. And if everyone does that, I don't think we're helping society or helping climate change. So we really need to think about these technologies, and we have this opportunity to reimagine what that future looks like. For us, that future is about shared mobility. It's making sure that there's more people in that car, that it's electrified, and that we move towards autonomous vehicles in a safe, sort of gradual pathway. So some of that's here today. You can see Uber and Lyft with their shared lines, and that's a great innovation, and that's using big data and a lot of analysis to be able to do that. And a lot of those companies obviously are thinking about what are those next steps, and we want to work with them to ensure the equity piece and the shared prosperity. So we want to move forward regardless. We have this momentum, we have these companies here, and so part of that is creating this platform. We're creating a Smart City Institute called Super Public with UC Berkeley and a nonprofit called City Innovate Foundation and a number of partners from Deloitte and Microsoft to a number of companies that are going to be supporting this. We want everybody to work with us and to figure this out. It's not going to be government, it's not going to be academia, it's not going to be industry. We need to work together, and that's why we're creating this platform. We're really excited about it, and we've dedicated space right near City Hall at 50 UN Plaza with our federal agency GSA to remove the layers of bureaucracy. So federal, state, local government, they're going to be vertically integrated. We're going to bring in industry, we're going to bring in academia, and there's a lot of excitement around that idea, and we're really trying to innovate. How do we collaborate better, right? And that's, I think, the differentiator of the Bay Area. We know how to work together. We have the density of talented people and institutions, and we want to recreate that from a societal perspective, from a civic perspective. What does that platform look like? How do we collaborate and work together across sectors? So we don't know the answers, but we want to work together on figuring out what that model looks like.
My question is, we've seen some of these programs, and we've even worked on a program here in Wearable IoT World, IoT for Cities, bringing all these different sectors together in conversation, pushing forward with some use cases. How do you move from ideation through to implementation, working with all these different sections of government and enterprise and startup?
It's a really good question. I think the key part of it is really clearly understanding what that need is. What is that problem statement? What does that look like? And really deeply understanding that, and then having a methodology and clearly time bounding the work, right? If we just sort of continue to sort of be thinking abstractly about what those answers might be, we're not learning, right? We need to iterate, and of course that's how Silicon Valley has been able to create so much value, is through this agile approach of really experimentation. And we want to adopt that same methodology when we're thinking about change in society. Let's not try to put it on paper and try to figure this out. Let's actually run little small experiments and build upon those learnings. So I think that's going to be a key way for us to work together. And really, if we win the grant, it's a 3-year period. We have to really move quickly. So the clock is starting from day one.
Do you see your fellow finalist cities as competitors or as partners in this challenge?
Well, when I think about this competition broadly, what I think is interesting is that it's really moving government from being sort of reactive to needs and issues to really being proactive, right? And taking a leadership role and saying, hey, we know that mobility is changing. Instead of us sort of waiting for those changes to happen and then changing the regulatory environment, let's actually work together to anticipate what those changes are, to change the regulatory environment, to change the way that we do things. And so that, I think, is a huge mind shift. And I applaud the DOT for doing that. And I think the nation's going to benefit, not just San Francisco if we win, but every city. All the cities that applied, and there's 78 cities that applied, I think every one of those cities are thinking about how do we advance this topic, how do we make sure that the safety's there, it's equitable, all of those things that I talked about before. So I don't think there's any losers here. I think we're all going to be able to learn from each other. And of course, we hope that we win. But if we don't, we're moving forward. We want to learn from the other cities and the work that they're doing. And that's the great thing about cities. We can collaborate, right? We're not competing like companies are in the private sector. So we have that ability to say, hey, what's working in your city? What's not? Let's build upon those learnings.
Well, and you've done that with the Startup in Residence program, actually bringing in a lot of the cities in and around San Francisco, San Leandro, Oakland, to kind of test pilot this program together.
And I think that's an important piece, is that we can work together, and if we do work together, it's actually a larger market opportunity for these companies, right? Then instead of us working individually at different speeds and different outcomes, how do we all work together? We have the same needs often, and I think that's a really powerful way that we can help catalyze private industry and others to work with us to say, hey, look, San Leandro is a small city, but hey, if we partner together with Oakland and San Francisco, they can leverage that relationship to really attract great companies to work with them as well. So something we're excited about. And I want to go back to our partners. We have just so much innovation happening here. You see the Detroit companies having innovation outposts in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, because this is where the talent is. This is where the change is happening. And when we asked them to work with us, we had an amazing response. We had over 200 people come to our event. We had 100 proposals of how they might be able to contribute and work with us. And we had 70 companies provide commitments and support letters totaling over $150 million worth of contribution. So almost a 4-to-1 leverage of the 40 million that they're putting together. And I think that's hard to walk away from, right? If you're putting $40 million and there's $150 million, ready to deploy with that money. So I think we're, the region has put a really strong proposal together collectively. It's not just San Francisco, it's all of us working together. That's what's really exciting.
So in terms of those other public and private partners that you're working with, can you talk about who you're working with right now, or is that a little bit more proprietary?
Well, I think we want to go through a process that is make sure that we work with the best, right? Just because a company is ready to contribute, that may not be the right fit. It may not be the product. So that's great that they're willing to partner and step up and commit products and services and their talent. But we need to go through a process, and I think again it goes back to what are those needs, what is that pain point, and how do we solve that? And it's collectively thinking about that. And those companies that are, putting on the table some value, we definitely want to consider that. I mean, why would we not? So that's part of the process, though.
And you guys are kind of going through some of that vetting process now as you are.
We are. It's a big number of we have to vet and look through. So we're looking at how do we do that at scale? How do we bring everybody together to do workshops to really explore more deeply how we might be able to work together? So that's an active process that we're going through right now. And it's in anticipation of securing that grant, but also saying, hey, we're going to move forward right now. Why wait till June or July? I think it's in July when DOT makes the announcement. We want to start moving things forward now.
Like you said, you have that 3-year period, and you just want to kick it off.
Yeah, we have momentum, right?
Yeah.
There's the private industries are really excited. We're excited in city government and academia. We've got a lot of partners working together already, and so we just want to continue moving that ball forward.
I have a couple more questions for you, a little bit more broad, but in your experience and to you personally, what to you makes a smart city smart?
I think a smart city is really about our people, right? And I think that's why San Francisco is naturally a leader and will continue to have a leadership role when it comes to smart cities. Great cities are created by great people. Mm-hmm. When you think about the Bay Lights, Ben Davis and the team around him had that bold vision of saying, hey, let's do the largest LED installation in the world and do it privately. Let's not ask anyone for help on this. We're going to do this on our own. We're not going to ask government to finance this. Had that bold vision, and he was able to bring our community and philanthropy and a whole bunch of people together, and governments and the Coast Guard and so many folks together around this shared vision. And I think that's the promise of the Bay Area and San Francisco, is that we have the courage to dream big and to not question that dream, but really how do we achieve that? And so we have it, I think, in our people, and it's in our history, right, of always sort of leading, and what starts in San Francisco often follows in California and the rest of the country. So we have that natural leadership. We in San Francisco want to continue that tradition by being good partners, by saying, hey, how do we streamline that approach to working with us? How do we streamline the approach to working in the public realm so you can deploy new technologies and learn? There's only so much you can do in the lab. How do we actually, in city government, learn about these technologies? We're not experts in technology, but we need to understand them and the benefits of them. So when we're making capital investments in our lighting, in our roads, in our sewer systems and waterways, we're making sure that we hear from all of the right technology folks to say, these are the things we should be doing and thinking about it this way. And so it's really changing that interaction from a sales sort of conversation to how do we work together on achieving these outcomes? And that's a big difference, and it's a big shift in how we're thinking.
Much more collaborative.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
And so what to you then are your goals and dreams for the city of San Francisco?
Well, I want a city that is safer, that one that's reducing climate impact, one that's an affordable city, one that's more equitable, and technology plays a role in that. It's not going to solve all those issues, but it can help change some of those areas. And so, again, we need to work together. So what you said, it's about collaboration, and it's something that we're good at, right? I think it's in our DNA in San Francisco to work together across different communities, and we've seen change happen from the bottom. And so we want to work with our communities and saying, what are those issues? How do we work together? Bring in the technology companies and industry folks. That's the right way, and I think the only way for us to really become leaders in this area.
And so one more question for all of our startups that we work with here at Wearable IoT World. What is your advice to startups trying to get involved in government?
Well, the first thing I would say is that there's a huge opportunity to make impact, right? It's the reason why you started your company, right, is to make impact. The other is that it's a big market. When you think about the spend in technology alone, nationally, it's close to $150 billion annually. If you think about how technology is in everything, it's a much bigger spend. So huge commercial opportunity. You have the ability to make impact. And I think government is changing, right? We're learning how to work with early stage startups. So that mantra of, if you work with IBM, then you don't have to worry about job security and losing your job. I think people realize that, hey, if there's a way to work together and understand the risks and be smart about it, we can actually make progress. So look at cities like ours that have adopted smart policies around startups and how do you work with them, like Startup in Residence. Oakland has done that, San Leandro, Amsterdam's done that, The Hague is moving forward. So a number of cities are becoming part of this movement to say, how do we work with startups to make government and society more effective? And our hope is that this is going to continue to grow, and we'll see a global movement, and it's already happening. So we're excited.
That's excellent.